our next reader for tonight is Dean Rader, who's come all the way through terrible, terrible traffic from San Francisco to reach us here. That is worthy of its own applause. Thank you. Dean is a professor of English at the University of San Francisco, where he holds the National Endowment for the Humanities Chair. He has published widely in the fields of poetry, literary studies, American Indian studies, and visual and popular culture. He has received the Crab Creek Review Poetry Prize and the Sauzier Poetry Prize, and his book, Works and Days, was a finalist for the Texas Institute of Letters First Book Prize, and it finally won the there you are, the T.S. Eliot Prize. I was lucky enough to get to read Dean's book in manuscript, and I'll tell you why later. The people that I read it with were immediately completely enamored of this book, and we were so sad when he won this prize. Happy for him, but sad for us, because it meant that 16 Rivers was not going to get to publish this phenomenal book. In 2009, Dean curated a special issue of Sentence devoted to contemporary American Indian prose, and in April of 2011, his innovative book, Engaged Resistance, Contemporary American Indian Art, Literature, and Film, From Alcatraz to the NMAI, was published by the University of Texas Press. Of his collection, Works and Days, the Bay Area Seasonal Review wrote, "Poetry doesn't get much better than when narration and music, reality and imagination, seriousness and giddiness all hook up. And I will vouch that this is definitely one of my favorite collections. The poems are quirky and inviting and play with language in a way that won me over the very first time I read it and continues to win me over every time I reread it. Please help me welcome Dean Rader."
I grabbed what I thought was poems, but it was the agenda from our department meeting yesterday. Announcements. Welcome, new faculty. Well, it's great to be here. Gillian's right. I braved the traffic from the city to get here, and it was brutal. But more amazing than that was how it kept getting hotter the closer that I got, and the later in the day it was. In San Francisco, the later in the day it gets brutally cold, but here it was like 5:30, 90 degrees, 5:45, 93 degrees. It was the inverse of what I expected. I'm going to read a few poems from a forthcoming book. It comes out in a couple of weeks, called Landscape Portrait Figure Form, and they're poems about art for the most part, but mostly I'm going to read from my book, Works and Days. Is this weirdly reverberating, or is it okay? Yes? Just for me? Okay. It's a little trippy. Okay, so the first poem I'm going to read is the poem from, it's a poem from this forthcoming book, but it also appears in, I feel like I should do a version of The Whiter Shade of Pale or something like that. I have a folio of poems in the forthcoming issue of Ziziva, which I guess is just out this week or next week. And this is a poem from that issue of Ziziva and also from my book. And the title is called Apocryphal Self-Portrait. And it has an epigraph. And many of you will recognize this epigraph. And the epigraph is this: "The coldest winter I ever saw was the summer I spent in San Francisco," right? You guys all know that? It's attributed to Mark Twain, as you all know, but he never said it. No one really actually knows who said it. There's no trace of it ever being said. It's just falsely attributed to him. So this is called Apocryphal Self-Portrait. "The darkest night of my life was that morning in your car. My heart would not stop raining. You said it was climate change. I may not be able to prove you wrong, but that doesn't mean the end is near. The end is always near. I read somewhere that the sum of the earth's water will never change. Nothing is taken away, nothing added. Every drop is the same age. Every age died in the same drop. The cut-up clouds, stretched and strung out, have had about enough. Each day is a boat on a lake that we row ourselves into. We try to pick at the scab of sunlight itching overhead, but we can't take our eye off the little crack in the hull we know keeps growing. The Buddha says, every place we've been, we stay. Right now, he's in my dream, sitting alone at an empty table, my tiny chair about to collapse beneath him. Mark Twain walks in the room looking exactly like Colonel Sanders. In one hand, he cradles a bucket of chicken. In the other, he carries an axe. The heaviest weight is the lightness of the soul, he says to the Buddha. Give in to the dark, the Buddha replies, and you won't feel the darkness. The longest drive we ever took was that evening we parked next to the cliff. The sidereal dashboard, the cracked windshield of the body. I want you to know that it is never the darkest right before the dawn. I want you to know the truth about everything. I want you to know that when those memories drop down, my umbrella opens. Thank you. Sam is a tough act to follow. Let's just say that. Youngest poet laureate. That's impressive. I was born in, this is my first time to Modesto, by the way. I'm very excited to be here. I took a photo of the water wealth arch as I drove in. It was very cool. I was sort of randomly and accidentally born in Stockton. So it's sort of, I was conceived in Oklahoma, I grew up in Oklahoma, but these things have a way of taking on a life of their own. So it's great to be here, and this is the coolest space ever. All right, so I'm going to read this poem called, unlike Sam, I don't have a set list. This is all random. And by the way, I take requests. I'm like a bad wedding band. So if there's a poem, yes, you. Einstein. Noted, I'll do it. One of my good friends is the novelist Cristina Garcia. I don't know if you know her. She's famous for her novel, Dreaming in Cuba, and she just wrote this fantastic book called The King of Cuba, which I got to read in manuscript. And she was telling me she wanted to work on a book of poems about her brother, but she was really nervous because she's not a poet. And so I was assembling the poems for this book. This was about 4 years ago now. And so we agreed we were going to send each other a poem every month. And we did this for like a year and a half. And our books wound up coming out about the same time. And I was always really jealous of her ability to tell a story in a poem. So this is a poem that I wrote after my wife and I were in Cuba. And it's kind of my attempt to write a Cristina Garcia poem, and it's called How to Buy a Gun in Havana. First, never say the word gun, or pistolero, or buy. Talk instead about Platanos and smile. You'll know the bodega. It's the one in Los Sitios with the wooden parrot clipped to the wire on the left side of the door. When the wind springs up off the sidewalk, the parrot bobs slightly, banging its crimson head against the building's wooden slats. Go inside. On the far wall above the shelves of candles and tilty stacks of shirts, you'll see a blackboard. It's the same in every store. An inventory of frijoles negros, arroz, and leche de coco, menued in chalk. You'll scan the inventory for plátanos, hoping they are in stock. You never know. You will have brought with you a pouch of powdered milk. Inside will be powdered milk and 850 euros. No dollars, no sterling. The pouch will be glued shut, no tape, no staples. You will, as you do with your wife, your children, your boss, barter. There is no baby formula in Cuba, no cow's milk. You will hand over the pouch and ask for plátanos. It is said that at a similar bodega in Vedado, you look the man behind the counter in the eye. But here you are supposed to settle on the framed photo of the Cathedral de San Cristobal nailed to the wall above the shirts. The woman will place the plátanos in a plastic bag. You will take them. You will not say thank you. No one knows the precise chain of events, not even you, because as you are told, you turn away. You walk over to the shelves next to the old Coke cooler and ruffle through frisbees, pantyhose, and postcards of Shea playing golf in army fatigues. By the time you are finished, your bag of plátanos will feel heavy. At that point, you walk out of the store and out of Los Sitios and make your way to the Malecón, and you gaze at the lovers lounging on the wall, and you stop for mango ice, and you ask yourself, as you have done with everything meaningful in your life, what happens now? I like the applause after every poem. I'm just going to read 50 haiku and be done with it. It's a pleasant departure from the uber cool San Francisco crowd who will not clap, lest they be perceived as being too into anything. All right, so as Gary requested, I'll read this poem called Einstein, which is one of the oldest poems in the book. And it's a poem about Einstein, but kind of about Borges. So I got the idea for this poem from the short story by the great Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges, The Tower of Babel, in which he imagines the universe as a book and God as a book. And so you spend eternity sort of looking as a big library. It's this big library. The eternity is a library. And so the epigraph for the poem is, the universe, parenthesis, which others call the library. He hated tomatoes and was afraid of the noises in the desert at dusk. At times, the numbers thumped across the brain like horses or bad sentences. Just a second of peace, he would say to himself, a moment to see images, music, colors, the calculus of the visible. What does it mean to see light and think of a poem? To see numbers and arrive at heaven? To look at stars and picture a river? What does it mean to know time the way one knows a language? To say that centuries or seconds are the letter T in a poem of infinite metaphors. If you divide the present by the past, you arrive at perception. If you see light as wave, you hear the word silence. If you see light as particle, you hear the word wind. Is the opposite of darkness darkness? Einstein thinks. I know that what we are, we have become, and what we have become, we turn to shadow, and what the shadow touches, the present forgets. Memory is the shadow of the present stretching backward, forming the equation to prove Borges was right. God is a book. The translator, me. The language, desire. That's very sweet. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to read a poem from the new book. I think this is going to be only the second time I read this out loud. You guys all know the kids' books, the Choose Your Own Adventure stories, right? Okay. This poem is called The Poem Chooses Its Own Adventure. It's adventurous. It has the word ass in it. That's okay? All right. It's about a donkey. So, you laugh, but the poem chooses its own adventure. This is a long poem for me, but I hope it moves quickly. So settle back and now the poem is on a bus somewhere in Marrakesh, scratching its way along one of the old roads south of Ajima Alfina. No one recognizes it, of course. The poem is unshaven, sandaled, and wearing a poncho. On its head, a maroon fez. Who knows the last time the poem bathed? It could have been weeks. The poem smells like your ass. If you want the poem to smell like something else, you have to skip down 7 lines. You would not have chosen Morocco for the poem. You hate sardine balls, and you're convinced people only eat couscous because it sounds funny. The poem is tired of you. It needed to get away. You ask so much of it these days. Your demands are extravagant. You wanted the poem to take you to Paris. You entertained fantasies of coffee and croissants. You had even spoken to your friends of élan and joie de vivre. When is the last time you did anything for the poem? It's always about you. Still is, you know. Even now, in line 19, you can't get past your own expectations. But the poem has needs of its own. It's like a dog that was born on a leash. It's like a dog. It's like a leash. Snap it on. Tell it to bark. Tell it to lie down. Make it beg. You forced it to sleep outside its whole life. And now the poem's in a jungle in Bolivia, in an ashram in Orissa, a whorehouse in Amsterdam. You didn't even know you wanted a poem with the word whorehouse in it, but the poem did. And that's the difference. It's about care. It's about attention. It's about giving. And let's face it, you are a taker. And so the poem is golfing in Orlando, hiking in the Alps. The poem is on the move. If you want a poem about stasis, stop looking. If you want a poem that surprises you, that inspires you, that rocks your world, you have chosen the wrong poem. The poem has had it with you. It's rolling a joint for Ginsberg. It's digging its way out of the Dust Bowl. It's fighting for the Confederates. It's helping Geronimo shoot a white man. It's killed Lewis and is seducing Clark's wife. The poem picks evasion. It selects erasure. It opts for abandonment. It wants you out of its life. It's decided it was wrong about beauty. And though it might be indifferent to love, the poem is coming back for glory. And now the poem is in the back seat of a cab, your address in the GPS. Its sideburns are longer. It's wearing a dress. Its fur glistens in the blue light of the dashboard. It's on all fours. You are fast asleep in front of the television. And now it's line 45, and the poem is tired of playing games. And so it is finally decided, despite everything you might have expected, to end it all right here. But Gillian, what do you think? 2 more? 1 more? 2 more? 3 more? Can I get 4 from anyone? These over here, they're going like, 1 more, 1 more. It's time to start drinking. Oh yeah, I like the Frog and Toad poems. All right, so I'll do 3 love poems. All right, how about that? It's a hot, steamy night. Everyone in here is drinking. They've heard poetry. There's more poetry to come. By the way, I have a 4-year-old boy named Gavin who's about to turn 5. I'm keeping him away from your daughter. It was a note to myself as you were reading. All right, so you guys all know Mad Libs. You guys have done Mad Libs. I don't know how many of you can see, but this, if you want to follow along, it's on page 34. I can see someone with the book open. So this poem has a lot of blanks in it. And I missed a naming opportunity. I should have called this poem Mad Lib Love Poems. But instead it's called A Genealogy of Unfinished Love Poems. So they're blanks because, you know, the poems are unfinished. But you get to finish them, right? So you get to complete the incompleteness of my poems. And it's in 4 parts, and each of the incomplete love poems is a certain kind of poem. A genealogy of unfinished love poems, and I will indicate the blanks by, you know, saying blank. A genealogy of unfinished love poems. Elegy. I don't know what the dead blank about love. If, for instance, they remember it the way an amputee recalls a missing blank, a necessary part of the body found only in a memory of blank, slick in water, hot over flame, delicate on thigh, in a mouth, or if the blank is just sorrow. Comedy. Your eyes are so blank. There is no way they can be glass, though the left one is always a bit off-center. I wonder if your body is already on the lookout for the first blank of my ear hair. Your feet are so blank. I don't care that they're webbed. You're my duck, my beautiful little duck. You can't imagine the ways I want to make you quack. And then there is your blank. Blank. I really like it. In fact, I wish I could carry it around in my knapsack. I'd blank it the way an archaeologist handles a sacred vase, the way a cop grabs the most dangerous felon. I'd handcuff it to my belt loop. I'd wear it like it was too loaded blank. Haiku. With the blank union, even holy men forget it is God they blank. Epistolary. Dear blank. I want to blank for lying to you about that home ec teacher. She meant nothing to me. And I need to come clean about the trapeze artist, the pool boy, your blank. What was I thinking? I hope you realize that I have forgiven you for pushing me into the blank of that classic scholar. She's ancient history. That's a little joke, but I'm not joking about how blank I feel. And your cousin Sophie, really, my mistake. And about the palm reader, all she did was blank my hand. Honest. But when she traced the creases, the narrow blank on the map of the future world, she made me think. I want to know you the way she knows these lines. I want you to blank me the way she knows how to lie. So in both the Works and Days book and the Landscape Portrait Figure Form book, there's a series of self-portrait poems that are sort of not self-portraits. And this is a poem called Self-Portrait as Photograph Never Taken. And I was sort of imagining these kind of, how moments of our lives you sort of imagine to be photographs that don't ever get taken. Self-portrait as photograph never taken. Here is the wind as it locks and reloads above the waves. And there, the clatter of gulls scattershot across the beach. Notice the couple caught in mid-laugh as the little dog of time tags along behind them, its leash a tink, tink, tink in the distance. What is life but dark waters washing us up, tied in and tied out? The sky, white as an angel's robe, the angel's robe strung up somewhere between what we want and what blinds. What are the chances I'll recall any of this next week? How likely is it that the hour I have my hook dug into will tear its tine from your skin? Let's tell the carpenter to put down his hammer. What do we care if the bell goes on with its silent journey through the hours? We can build our own fire, string our own line. Maybe the sea will peel back its waves. Maybe the blackened boat of the body will reel in the last rope from the pier. Maybe the fish, maybe the lone gull, maybe the moon a-swim in its minnow bucket. Even if the stars take it all back, even if the drummer drops his sticks and walks into the ocean, even if the trees tie on their bad blindfolds, we'll be okay. We don't need anything except what we will remember, and even that will change, like a cloud whose rain is about to fall. Just wait. Someone is going to warn that boy against building sandcastles so close to the water. It won't be me. And so I'll close. You guys all know Frog and Toad, the lovable children's book characters. Anyone not know Frog and Toad? I love Modesto. People know Frog and Toad. So if you do not know Frog and Toad, they were characters created by this great children's book writer, Arnold Lobel, late 60s, early 70s. And I describe them as amphibian versions of Bert and Ernie. Is that about right? Right? There's a kind of happy, jocular one, and then the slightly crankier one. Frog is the happy-go-lucky, and Toad is less so. And so the book has about 5 or 6 Frog and Toad poems. They're by far the most commented on poems by reviewers and readers. And so I'm going to close with the first Frog and Toad poem in the book. It's called Frog and Toad Confront the Alterity of Otherness. And a quick explanation. If you don't know the term alterity, it's a term that's a sort of a translation of the term alterity invented by the great German philosopher Emanuel Levinas. Das Alter in German is the other. And Levinas's great theory, he was an ethicist, was that the great ethical move in our lives is if you could see the other not as the other, but as an extension of yourself. There's also, I use the word aletheia in here, which is Greek for revelation or unveiling, which Heidegger preferred over the Latin notion of truth. That's about all you need to know. And then there's Frog and Toad. So I want to thank Sam. He was great. It's a real pleasure reading with you. Thanks to the Barkin Dog. This is cool. and thanks to Gillian for organizing this. This is really great. And thanks to you all for coming. You're a super cool audience. I want to come back to Modesto. I might get to hear poems. Is this right? That's great. It's worth the traffic. Frog and Toad confront the alterity of otherness. The sun was hot in the sky, like a muffin in a bright blue tin. The day was just the day. The wind was nothing more than wind. The leaves were leaves and kept on being leaves. Frog, however, wondered why he was Frog and Toad was Toad. Frog knew who he was, but this strange morning he feared he was the wrong one. His skin felt too clammy, his eyes too bulgy. Even his pajamas seemed that of another creature. Everything was wrong, the trees overhead, the birds in them. Toad, on the other hand, woke up troubled by how different he was than Frog. To him, Frog was wholly unknown and unknowable. The yellow flowers outside his window, the water birds down by the lake that arrived only in winter, the dreams of alligators and snakes that swam through his sleeping, all made more sense to him than this Frog in his threadbare suit and flappy feet. How odd. They both wanted to fold into the foreign skin of the familiar, inhabit the frog and toadness of the other. It is Toad who will understand that to love the unknown is to say yes to the ineffability of difference, and Frog shall find himself stunned with the recognition that to love the miasma of mystery is to say yes to sorrow, yes to the presence of absence, yes to the chance that Alethea may never rise out of the pond. Frog makes Toad some toast with strawberry jam. He waddles across the room, sets down the plate, pours Toad a cup of coffee. The sun is hot in the sky like a scone on a sky blue table. Toad looks over at Frog. Good old Frog, he thinks. That bastard knows I hate toast. Toad spreads the jam like a man might smooth mortar on a brick for which there is no building. Thank you, he says. Thank you, Frog. Thank you.